So I'd like to introduce your chair, Vanessa, from Notified, and also RJ from Bloomberg. So I'll hand over to you both.
Great. Thank you very much, Matt, and thanks for coming along, guys. I know we're getting to the end of the second day, so we're going to keep this really exciting for you. We are in for a real treat today, and I do not say that lightly. RJ Schaefer, who's joining us here from Bloomberg, he is the head of event technology. And RJ is going to share with us the journey that they've been on over the last couple of 3 years to take what was a very different looking event portfolio then to where it is now, and also going to give us a little bit of insight into what might be coming further ahead in the future as well. RJ is going to give us a little bit of a flavor of how they've created an event stack that works for them and how they've selected the right sort of people. Event tech stack. I think I missed the crucial word tech there, didn't I? And also we're going to start to touch on towards the end a little bit of what might come next for event technologists. So RJ's job title, Head of Event Technology. This is a job title we're seeing a little bit more of. That didn't really exist as a job title 3 years ago. So as well as how you scale up to the level of portfolio of events that RJ is responsible for making work brilliantly, we're also going to touch on what might be coming next for you guys in the future as well. So RJ, firstly, thanks for coming, because he's just got off a plane from Singapore this morning to be here from one of their major events. How are you feeling, and how was the event?
The event was great, which is probably the most important thing. I felt like it's dinner time since about 6 a.m. this morning, so I don't know, we'll see, but hanging in there.
I should have bought you some snacks. So let's set the context, set the scene so that everybody understands the position that you're coming from. Could you give us a sense of what your role is at Bloomberg, a quick insight into the event portfolio at large, and do feel free to give us, I think, a little bit of the history as well that helps to establish the context for where you are today.
Sure. So I created the event technology team at Bloomberg. Previously, pre-COVID, it was just me and one other person, kind of just focused on virtual events. With COVID and all the shifts that happened there was a need to really bring together the technology stack under kind of one group. And so the team that I created really has kind of me focusing on our strategic global platforms, technologies that we're using, as well as the kind of day-to-day production support of specific events at the company. We do about 3,000 events a year globally across all three event formats. And so my team is not touching all 3,000 of those events, but we are, we've built a plan, the ability to kind of scale in a way that allows us to touch many of those. And so the team itself, like I said, is focused around event production and event support. It isn't just the AV side of it. It very much is creating the events, building out the pages, working with our event managers and our marketing managers and our business stakeholders to understand what the goal of the event is and what the different engagement types of the event needs to be there for their attendees. And it's quite significantly different than what it was pre-COVID. So just to kind of lay the groundwork there, pre-COVID, we were doing about 400 virtual events a year. Those were typically audio only with PowerPoints. Come COVID, our event program, like everyone else's, shifted fully in person, and we had to kind of take the existing stack that we had and kind of flip it on its head and work with platforms that were kind of scoped out to do maybe, 5 events a week, maybe 15 a month, and really start to crank out 50 to 100 to 150. And it was a bit of a wild ride. I think a lot of us here can probably agree with that. But as a part of that change, not only did we expand our tech stack and really refine it to kind of fill the gaps that we had before that I guess were created because of the pandemic, but also allowed us to start to really innovate from the end-to-end workflow of registration to data management to what kind of metrics we're collecting and how we're using them. And I think we've put together some interesting ways to kind of approach the event planning and execution process.
Yeah. So if you're sitting there thinking 3,000 events, this is irrelevant to me, I do 5, it's still relevant, right? The concepts, the design efforts that we're going to come to shortly, It's all relatable, and it really is. I've been very lucky to chat with RJ several times to prepare for this, and quite a bit this morning as well. And the approach is what is going to be the real takeaway here. So don't worry if you don't do 3,000 events. Not many people do. So that's the context. Thank you for that. And what's going to come ahead in the future? What are you looking forward to about 2023, and how do you think things may evolve? Hopefully not at quite the same pace, because I think no one would want to be doing the same level of change as the last couple of years, but what's on the horizon?
Well, I guess looking forward to seeing how the industry kind of settles. I think we're still in a settling period. Our expectation is that we're still going to have a portfolio very much that includes in-person, virtual, and hybrid. We've been focusing really heavily on hybrid, and a part of my job, my team's job, is really to show the benefit of the hybrid event, because as many of you know, it is more complex than just running an in-person event. There's different layers there, and we can talk a little bit about that complexity if you like. But so I think looking forward, I'm very much, in order to kind of be able to support the number of events that we do at Bloomberg, it's all about kind of processes and being able to kind of outline different groups and types and attributes that fall into that, so that you can, take an event, understand the attributes, understand what the outcome is meant to be, the goals, etc., put that into that group, and then go from there. And so in order to do that, you have to have a baseline for all those groups. So I think, speaking very generally, I realize I'm looking forward to kind of moving into next year and having our foundation, that baseline for those different groups, really solidified, so that we can start to look at the stack holistically moving forward, probably towards into 2024, and see what's working, what's not, what's missing, what gaps do we need to fill, and ideally pair that with emerging technologies out in the space and anything else that we're seeing come up in the next 12, 24 months.
So perhaps getting to a little bit more of the fine-tuning stage as opposed to the radical overhaul stage of the last couple of years.
So I think for us, the way that we've been thinking about event technology and event execution and setup is really around this idea of like the front end versus the back end. The front end is going to be your event platform, what you as the attendee go to experience that virtual event, for example. The back end is really going to be the components around, maybe the CMS that the event manager, the event technician uses to set that event up, the AV production that's used to capture that content and deliver it out to that front end. And so we've split it up into those different areas, because I think the event technology as a whole is just too large to deal with. And so fine-tuning, right now we're going to be focusing primarily on our event production side of things and really elevating our production experience, so that ideally Bloomberg is set apart from other companies and their events when it comes to the look and feel and kind of the overall experience of the event production as from the attendee perspective.
Yep.
That also touches the speaker side and business stakeholders and whatnot, but primarily I think we're going to start with that attendee experience.
Okay, we might come back to those three different groups. So the attendees, speakers, stakeholders. I'm going to hold that thought because I think we'll come back to that. We've also had a question come through around hybrid events, which I'll ask you in a moment. But before we do that, what does a hybrid event mean at Bloomberg, and how did you come to that definition?
Yeah, so we kind of went fully into hybrid in our definition, and that means that, yes, the traditional sense of what we're doing here, this is being streamed out, you're sitting here in the audience. We went a step further and said any event that also has a virtual speaker, regardless if the rest of the event just has an in-person audience, that is a hybrid event to us. So we kind of expanded the definition there. And that's helped us to really hone in on those events that might have more complicated layers.
Yep.
Bringing in a speaker virtually for an event that otherwise is in person is a bit more complicated than just someone sitting on a stage. How are they being brought in? What is their experience like? How do you develop content to make sure that they're included in that experience? I'm referencing this because I'm so used to seeing the virtual speaker behind. Are they taking up the entire screen behind me? Are they, sitting positioned above this chair right here? What's the right approach to that? And there's different approaches. I don't think there's a right or wrong, but that expanded definition of hybrid, I think, was our take on kind of the pre-COVID more standard definition of that, and that's helped us really lean in on some of those events that might need, more support, more production, etc.
Yeah, and I saw quite recently a post on LinkedIn actually saying, is this a thing now that in-person events have virtually attending speakers, so speakers joining virtually? Is this a thing now? It's like, well, it kind of has become a bit of a thing actually, and I think how we do that well in the future is something we're all still working on. So the question that's come through already is, with your focus on hybrid events, how do you ensure all attendees joining globally can stay engaged? And this is kind of the $1 million question. So if you've got the answer to this, then we can go.
Yeah, I may not say it here if I have the answer. I might say it for myself. No, I think that this is something that everyone is struggling with, and I don't have the surefire answer for that. But I feel like this type of engagement where we've made an effort to be able to field questions from the audience. I'm assuming most of these are coming virtually, but they could be from this audience here too.
Yep. Yes, they could be virtually. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, but I think the option to be anywhere in the world that you are and submit a question and have that addressed, I think, is probably a driving force for someone to continue to stay on and listen in,
Yep.
And we do that for some of our events and not for others. Some sessions as a part of a larger event and not others. It depends on what the content is, who's speaking. The event that I just got back from in Singapore had a kind of a couple different types of sessions, but let's say fireside and a panel.
Yep.
And oftentimes questions are typically good for panels in that sense, so I think that's probably the biggest one that is the main focus right now. We talked about this earlier. I think the ability to elevate that production value so that someone isn't just listening to me talk with maybe like a lower third popping up and popping down for 45 minutes probably isn't the best experience. But maybe if I'm referencing some type of data metric or some type of, content from a previous event or whatever it might be, being able to dynamically display that and integrate that into the actual production output, I think, is a big one. We haven't solved that ourselves yet in a way that's scalable, but it's one that we're looking at into 2023 and 24. And I think, just have engaging content. I mean, what putting yourself in those shoes. I mean, do you all like to watch virtual content with kind of the same talking heads over and over again? I think some yes, some no, but how can we start to kind of push the boundaries there to make it more engaging?
Yeah, bring a little bit of dynamism to it.
Yeah.
I think also with the hybrid events, I had a very interesting conversation with a attendee earlier who was starting to get their heads around, what are we going to do next year? It feels like a lot of people haven't done a lot of hybrid this year, but are intending to do a little more next year, certainly the folks I've spoken to. And she's taking a really deliberate approach of not trying to replicate the same experience online as is happening in person, because you engage people in a different way online than how you would engage them in person. So that was, and I think that's incredibly important. We shouldn't be trying to replicate the exact same experience for all of those different attendees.
Yeah, and I think also when it comes to hybrid events, not every hybrid event has to be this a production that has two sides of it. It's okay to have a hybrid event that is just, a static camera shot distributing the virtual content out. That's totally fine. And so kind of going back to like groupings there, you might have that as, your group one, and your group three might be this fully custom, highly produced, highly complicated type of event, and they don't all need to kind of fall into that bucket. I think that people think that hybrid always has to be this really complex thing, and that isn't the case. Yeah,
I completely agree with that as well. We've got another question here, but before we come to that question, I'd like to pull up what you said around 3 different attendee types: speaker, attendee, and stakeholder. So firstly, what does stakeholder mean?
So for me, that means someone within whichever Bloomberg business that we're supporting with that event. So it could be a marketing manager that technically sits in marketing. It could be someone in sales that sits within the business that has helped with the development of the content of the program, that has kind of stake in that program and the kind of the success of the event itself. So generally that. I think it's really, in my mind, anyone that's associated with the event that is not directly executing that event, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That does make sense. So with that context, what are the different goals for the 3 different groups? The goal for the speaker to a certain extent I get them in, get the session, deliver what they need to do well. But what's the overall experience you want them to leave feeling? Same with attendees, same with the stakeholders. And how do you make those 3 different experiences actually happen how you want them to?
Yeah, I think we're all most familiar with the attendee experience and the goals there. I think that's pretty straightforward. And what we found kind of early 2021 was that we were running all these events. They were on a couple different platforms. They were going really well from the attendee experience. All of our attendees were giving us great feedback on the event and the content and all of that, ability to join, et cetera. But we were still kind of hearing this noise internally around this platform isn't good. Why don't we just use Zoom for everything? Like if I had $1 for every time I heard that, I would be wealthy probably. And so we kind of dove into that further and we realized that it was actually on the speaker experience that we were having issues. And it was anything from connectivity through kind of a WebRTC based platform in the backend studio to being on site in one of our offices and the production team using Wi-Fi instead of a hardwired connection, leading to issues there. And so that led us to kind of start to split out the experience and kind of the different user personas that are associated with an event. And that's been really helpful for us. So attendees, I think we're clear on that. The ability to register, get clear communication, join the platform, hear and see everything, submit questions, et cetera, be able to use the platform as expected. On the speaker side, the ability to connect and make it as easy as possible for them to deliver the content that they're there to deliver. They're not meant to be experts in a platform's backend.
No.
They should just be focused on clicking a link, joining, and
doing that thing.
Delivering the content, exactly. And then on the stakeholder side, that's going to differ depending on who the stakeholder is, but again, kind of thinking about Bloomberg's scale of events, we've set up different workflows where our event managers can go in and create events themselves, which is really helpful for us. So my team will still help execute it, but they don't have to rely on us to go in and add a speaker bio or update the title to this or that. So from that experience side, it's really the ability to easily access the platform, create the event listing, set up the different integrations that need to happen, and then hand it over to my team.
Yeah, got it. And you guys have also developed a really interesting way of pulling all 3 of these together. I think the term you use is digital control rooms. So could you tell us a little bit more about the acronym? I learned the acronym DCRs. I just remembered. I was very excited by that. Tell us a bit more about those and how they work.
Yeah, so that is a project that we launched back in May that came out of this, what I was mentioning before, a speaker joining a platform backend and seeing all these different buttons and whatnot and being distracted, or clicking the allow microphone and camera and clicking deny instead of allow, and then having to walk them through the painful steps of open up Chrome, go to settings, and really just thinking how can we elevate this speaker experience in addition to a couple other things which I can get into. And that landed us on a few things. One, the ability for the speaker to leverage a collaboration tool, Zoom, Team, WebEx, et cetera, of their choice to be able to connect for that event. So they don't have to go to the specific platform's backend studio. And also my team being able to remotely produce these events. So what we came up with was digital control rooms, DCR. These are not physical rooms, hence the digital side of it. But what they are 3 systems that we put in place that allows the speaker to join through a Zoom link, for example. So they click a link, they go into Zoom, all they see is Zoom. That's it. My team can go in remotely, grab the different speaker sources, and then actually produce that into one singular output that can go to any endpoint that you can really think of. So not only have we elevated that speaker experience and solved the problem of, I'm the mayor of whatever town and my town uses WebEx, so I can't use Zoom. We've solved that. They can use whatever collaboration tool they like. But we've also created a central kind of delivery point for all of our endpoints. So we can, again, produce the event, and then from there send it to Notified, send it to YouTube, Twitter, any social media, send it to Bloomberg.com, send it to our internal Bloomberg terminal with essentially kind of one click of a button, and we can manage all of that in addition to a couple other things which you can get into. But that has been really instrumental, I think, in us elevating that speaker experience. It's kind of one of those things that's really kind of cool and sexy to me, but it's not to the speakers. Like they're just like, oh, I'm on Zoom. This is great. That event was so easy. In the back end, I'm like, that's really cool. Like,
you have no idea.
You have no idea what's going on, behind the scenes. And the fact that those can be remotely operated from anywhere in the world gives my team flexibility. And again, kind of leaning into that scale, the option to be in any city, anywhere, producing an event. So.
Great, thank you. Now, question we're going to come to with a little bit of sort of context and build up to it. So you have 3 different categories of events that you have sort of defined internally within Bloomberg, and you also have 3, I think, different formats of events, which would be digital only, in-person only, and then the hybrid. So the question is, do you align different event platforms with different event types? And if so, how do you define your event types? So let's start with that maybe. How do you define your event types?
Yeah, so roughly 3. Let's say 3,
okay.
Maybe 4. No, but I think that at kind of the more straightforward level, we have what we call like a virtual meeting. So that could be 5, 10, 15, 20 people that are having an open conversation, two-way communications. I see you, you see me. I might be the speaker, but it's more of collaborative conversation. That's kind of what we're leveraging something like Zoom for often, and is really where I've have focused those people that why don't we use Zoom for everything? Hey, great, go use it for that. It's actually perfect for that. The next one up is what we define as webinar or webcast. I found that some people think webinar sounds cheap, and some people think webcasts sound cheap. I don't know. I just use both now. And that's really kind of our short form event. So 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, one-way communication typically. So I'm the speaker, you see me, I don't see you, but you still have the ability to ask questions and do polling and all of that. And then the third major one is what we call a virtual environment, which would be multi-hour, multi-day type content that requires a more dedicated space for the attendee to register, access, review the agenda, pop in, pop out, just given the length of the event.
Gotcha. And do you have different platforms and different solutions for each of those 3 different types?
Yeah, we do.
You said Zoom for the first one.
Yeah, we do. Not necessarily exclusively for all of our types across the board, but generally speaking, for webinar webcasts, we use Notified for those, which, given the ability to templatize and kind of lean into those groupings that I said before on how custom something needs to be. It's been great for that. For our virtual environments, we're using kind of the major players in the space, Bizzabo, Hopin. We have some more bespoke platforms that we use depending on the business that's covered, the goals. We have a few platforms that are kind of bundled in with AV production as kind of a holdover from when we were fully virtual during COVID. So we have a couple different options there, but the bulk of what we're doing, about 80%, falls under that webinar webcast grouping. And that has, again, been helpful for us using Notify just to be able to kind of create all the different templates that allow us to run 50 plus of those a week sometimes.
Best customer ever. Thank you. I'm not going to ask you to plug Notified, though. That's not why we're here today, but thank you. And there's another question that's come through with around the DRC. I can see this is going to tick on. You should claim this.
I'm used to it.
Is it an off-the-shelf solution?
It is not, no. We actually partnered with a production company called Original Syndicate to build it out. They were not the first company we went to, not because we don't like them, but just had to start somewhere. And we're told no a couple times, too big, we don't have time for it, and then landed with them. And
well, the project was too big.
Yes, project's too big, we don't really want to dive into something like this. It's not our bread and butter, which I can appreciate. But no, they took it on, and we kind of scoped it out with them and gave them all of our requirements, and they built it out for us. So no, it is not off the shelf.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is your general position on off the shelf versus building?
I would say in the past we've definitely gone with off the shelf. I'm not opposed to them. I mean, within the stack itself, that we've implemented, we have off-the-shelf solutions. I think where we're really kind of focusing on custom solutions is more on that back-end content capture side of things, like the production side of things.
Got it.
On the front-end side, so let's say off-the-shelf, Notified or Bizzabo or whatever platform it might be, we've selected those platforms based on their ability to fulfill our needs, but also kind of going into those have a loose agreement that there's should be two-way dialogue on the development of the product and what's coming down and what's on the roadmap and how we can kind of help influence and shape what that off-the-shelf platform is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where having 3,000 events is a huge advantage, where you carry that weight. If you are not in that position, you may not have quite so much weight to carry with the suppliers. So I think my recommendation there, having been buy side before moving to the supplier side, is you really do need to understand their roadmap, what's coming down the line, so that you are sure they are going to be who you want to be partnering with in the future, because you're going in the same direction as them. So even if you don't feel you can carry the weight of 3,000, you can still find out what's coming on down their own roadmap and make sure it's aligned with you.
Yeah, and I think also what the platforms or what the technology, what their interests are. You know, I think for us, we're heavily looking into expanding our accessibility standards across the board. We have a nice solid baseline of that, which is great, but we haven't done enough. And so making sure that if you're looking at a technology or a platform, that they also care about that, or at the very least understand kind of your general like signal flow, if you will, so that if you wanted to incorporate a third-party accessibility platform into that flow, making sure that it integrates the right way with that platform.
So this leads on then quite nicely to another question. And actually, before I do that, please do send in any questions that you have. And if you're watching online, please do send them in, because we love answering them. I think it's safe to say. You've mentioned a couple of brands there, which thank you, by the way, because I think it really helps set the context, and we're all here to try and understand how to get the most and the best event tech that we can. But what else are the other sort of key component parts in your event tech stack? You don't need to name the companies necessarily, it could just be what they do. What else goes into building the successful events that you're running, as well as that core platform? What other integrations are there?
Well, I think that there's considerations there around data collection and data management. We spoke earlier about kind of metrics and just reporting overall. We did an activity probably close to a year ago now where we were trying to establish baseline metrics across all the different platforms that we use. And that could be a front-end platform where someone's actually registering directly, or a WordPress registration form that's going into something like Eloqua and being stored internally, whatever it might be. But understanding kind of what are we collecting, and can we find kind of a common thread across all of that? And that was very difficult to do. You know, we could find the basic registration information. We could find, obviously how many people registered, how many people attended, number of questions asked sometimes, but trying to look at reporting from, let's say, Notified, for example, versus reporting for Zoom, completely different.
I'm so pleased you said that.
Yeah, I mean,
it should be different, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the same goes for something like Bizzabo as well. I mean, just different ways to collect it. And then also the fact that some events aren't all the same. Some events might include a certain part of, a Q&A or polling. Some might not. And so I think data is a big one for us, and kind of we haven't solved that really. I think there's an idea that we really need something that's centralized in that. You'll probably notice a theme here of like bringing things in, having a central kind of middle part of the wheel that then kind of has spokes that go out to the different other components of it. But I think, our integrations are a big one there. We have different user groups that we have to consider from the attendee side as well. We have kind of our core product at Bloomberg is the Bloomberg Terminal, if those of you who aren't aware of that. And so we have kind of our web-based attendee experience and also our on-terminal attendee experience, and we need to make sure that our events are accessible on both. So the website is pretty, I won't say easy, but it's straightforward. That's kind of what we're all used to. But the integrations that we have to build in order to kind of also include that on-terminal experience too has some considerations for us. I recognize that probably won't resonate with a lot of people here, but I do think that it's important to think about your attendee type and where people are accessing the event. And
You must be having to get through some pretty ferocious firewalls at times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
It looks like there's been some experience there.
Yeah, and I think, just kind of going on that thread, it's we often, when we're looking at new technologies or new vendors, it's been difficult for us to keep up with the pace of the industry over the last 2 years.
Yep.
Because a startup that might be doing something really cool is hard to get approved for use, with the company itself. So that's something that I think limits our ability to move as fast as we'd like to move. But at the same time, I think that allows us to lean in on the platforms that we already have, and hopefully work with them to implement and stay kind of top of the line when it comes to what's going on in the industry.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. Thank you very much. A question has come through, and I think this is sort of relevant to what you were saying there around the attendee types and how you think about those. Is what tools do you use to engage your attendees? And you've mentioned polling, you've mentioned Q&A, but if you could elaborate, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we're necessarily doing anything that groundbreaking from an attendee engagement perspective. It's something that I definitely want to move into exploring kind of in 2023. I think my focus has really been around how do we engage with our audience across all of our events, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we're using a technology that no one else is using or doing something that cool or that unique, I should say. We just onboarded a new polling platform that will allow us to do kind of self-service polling ourselves. So instead of having to again set up everything ourselves, we can now give a link or give a login to an event manager, and they can set it up, and they can use that for any event that they want to use it. That as a baseline to me is probably most important at this stage, and getting people used to the fact that event technology doesn't just mean virtual event, that there are components of that
100%.
That they should be leaning into when it comes to in-person as well. So that's a tricky one for me. It's something that it makes me a little sad to say that we aren't doing anything that robust in the space yet, but I think that we're moving in the right direction there, and I think the digital control room work, elevating our production value there is one component of that, even though I think engagement typically probably means what can the attendee do during the event.
Yes.
I mean, for me, it's also how is the content portrayed to the attendee in an engaging way so that they continue to watch. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you. And question around introducing these new tools. That one you just mentioned there, that sounds like it's quite straightforward to use, but some of them they're a little more complex. For example, you said bringing data into Eloqua, for example. Who do you have to collaborate with within Bloomberg to make that actually happen? So you're in the marketing department, but who else gets involved in that kind of setup?
Yeah, so the marketing department at Bloomberg is quite large, and fortunately we have a whole marketing operations side that gets to deal with all that fun stuff. I like data a lot. I like when I can pull reports and see beautiful dashboards that tell me trends and all of that. Not so much the nitty-gritty. So we have a team on the marketing operations side that does all that.
So that's where you'd hook up with those guys,
Yep.
explain the goals, explain the brief, and then they will pick up. Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry, were you going to say something
No.
else? No. Okay, great. We've got a couple more questions in, so let's see what we go ahead. Do you think there is still a market for online meetings, or is it better to have an online meeting scheduling pre-show for a face-to-face meeting at the show? So I think that means set up something online where you get to know folks, or they can get to know each other before they come and meet in person. And do you still think the market for online meetings?
I'm assuming online meetings referring to my categorization from before?
I think
or
I'm
virtual events
gonna
in general?
I'm going to assume that's. Actually, yes. Whoever sent that, do they mean one-to-one meetings or group meetings? If you're in the room, feel free to shout out, and if not, we'll come back to that one. Maybe you could send us with your clarification of meetings.
Well, I think either way. I mean, yes, I think there's still a market for online meetings and a market for virtual events. I mean, that's clear. I don't think that the virtual event needs to replace the in-person or vice versa. I think that they can be used strategically depending on what the goals are, what the limitations are with, I don't know, location, budget, time, etc., whatever it might be. And I think, one of the benefits of the world kind of seeing this, or kind of being introduced formally to this mystical hybrid thing, is that it allows us to still focus in some cases on the in-person experience, but then have it as an add-on in some cases to get the content out there to those that can't be there, or maybe that could be because of travel or the size limitation of the event space, whatever it might be. I mean, the same goes for one-on-one meetings. I think yes to everything.
Okay.
That's a good way to answer something, right?
Thank you to whoever sent in their clarification point. Hopefully we've got that answered there as well. Now, this next one's an interesting one. How successful have you been at building engaged digital communities using these different types of digital events?
Yeah, that's been tricky too. I often will have stakeholders come to me and say, we want to build this evergreen community where we run it, the entire year, and we're constantly, doing events through it and having people network and this and that. And I think that what I've learned, my first response to that is, awesome, let's scope it out, let's try and see what you want to do. But also the fact that you really have to have a strong content program behind that.
Yes.
Because it takes a lot of work to create something that where people are going to continue to go to outside of like their normal channels, like a LinkedIn or something like that. So that's the first one. I by no means can take credit for this one, but I worked with our internal studio team at Bloomberg to develop a Bloomberg webinar portal that's been really great for us. So previously we had all of our events would just kind of have their own presence online. You'd have your registration page here, maybe we promote that, so on and so forth. But like the discoverability side of that was not there. Right. What the team built, I want to say maybe a year ago at this point, was what we call the Bloomberg webinar portal. It's bloomberg.com/webinars, and it's essentially where all of our events, or a good amount of our events, end up. Not only for those that have already happened, but also upcoming. So you, as the end user, could go there and say, "I'm interested in these 3 topics," and would filter it for you, and you could see what's already happened and what's upcoming. And what's really cool about that is that we've built an integration where we run a webcast, and that automatically gets published to that site. So we're able to kind of hit various endpoints and kind of check that discoverability box without having to kind of create something here and then here and then here. Again, kind of going back to that scalability side of things. That's probably as close as we've gotten to like a true digital community for our events. There's other examples. We have some event programs that we do each year where outside of the actual platform or the event technology itself, there's community building, but I think that might be a little bit off of what this person's asking.
Okay, gotcha. So there's sort of, it's an informational community hub, I guess, where they can go and get the webinars after they've happened and keep going. They know where to go. They're going to keep going back there. And automation sounds like quite an important part of that, but I guess with the volume you're running, also rather essential. Yeah,
automation from both the ability to access it as the attendee, but also on the data side too. So we're able to get attendance metrics both live and on demand from one central location, essentially.
Okay, thank you. Let's have a look at this next question here. So you've mentioned empowering the event teams to manage their events on the various platforms. Have your thoughts turned to how technology can help the whole event team operate more efficiently at an operational level?
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's a good one.
I think from my team's perspective, that's really been around this idea of self-service with full service. And I know that sounds strange and weird, but I'll explain it. So the ability for our team to be onboarded and have access to our different platforms with the option of supplemental support or eventual support from the event technology team. That goes back to what I was saying before about being able to create events themselves and not have to rely on emails back and forth for updates there. That's been probably the most efficient for us. We have other integrations internally around the different tools that we use to kind of, build and kind of track our event goals and kind of basic metrics internally there with some efficiencies. But I don't know, I guess we haven't really, this to me feels more of like a project management software or something like that could be beneficial. We haven't explored that too much. We are very streamlined in kind of what a business stakeholder who wants to engage with the events team needs to do. We have tools internally to support that they're within the Bloomberg terminal, so me mentioning it wouldn't even be applicable to anyone else here. And then really the option for people more on the executional side to go in and set these events up themselves to an extent.
Okay. There's another question that's come in, which I think is going to probably be pretty much our final question, because we're coming close to time, and it's bang on, I think, to close up with what the future may hold. I know you don't know, but what the future may hold for people like you who are absolutely event technology specialists, and perhaps those who are getting into it. With hybrid events being very much on the horizon, or whoever sent this in clearly thinks that hybrid events are the future, so I'm with them on that. But with them being on the horizon at least, does that mean that event professionals and event managers need to study audio and video in order to thrive in the new event world?
I think that it is helpful at a baseline, for sure. Understanding how things piece together, more or less, is important. I think when it comes to event technologists and the role itself being fairly new in its kind of current definition, and it's actually having a definition in general, I think that it's more crucial for that side of the world to lean in on the technical than event managers per se.
Yeah.
I mean, I really feel like, there's opportunity there for event managers to understand more of the technical side.
Yeah.
But I think that really the way that I've positioned my team is really to be kind of in between the technical and the non-technical, and help to kind of liaise between the two, and that's been really successful. Translating what the business wants to do to the team that might be on site, producing the show, or to one of the platforms that we use that might need some type of custom setup to achieve that goal, and then relaying that back to understand that the business can get what they want or not get what they want, or hopefully maybe a happy medium there. But
so the future for event technologists is perhaps being the link between goals, desires, hopes and dreams, and technical reality.
I think so. I can't remember if I said this before, but I feel like my team constantly has to work to decouple virtual events from event technology. And that is going to be a struggle that we'll have for a while, I think. But the idea is really that event technology touches every component of events, regardless of the type or the format. And so having a team that's strategic and really can kind of own the technology from the relationship perspective, but also the product roadmap perspective, and kind of lean in on into more of a traditional sense of a product manager, if you guys are familiar with that, where you really are working with an understanding of what the goals, what the ROI, all of that, what the KPIs are for a specific event or event series, or even a business area, and help to translate those into that event using the technology that you are owning and operating. I think that's probably the clearest part. But when it comes to hybrid, I feel like those event technologists among us really have our work cut out for us to continue to prove the value of hybrid events.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is aligning hybrid events and the results from those events back to the goals of the business.
Yeah, completely agree. RJ, thank you so much. You've been incredibly generous and full
Thanks for
in
having
your
me.
answers, which is greatly appreciated.
Hopefully not too full.
No, absolutely spot on. I think we can all give him a great big round of applause. Thank you, RJ.
Thank you.